Alright, well, hello once again. Welcome back to the Corrupt Movie Club. And today we're going to talk about The Last Airbender.
The
Yay!
last video, the last video made about the Last Airbender
Yeah,
of all time, the very last one. There will be no others. We are the very last ones.
yep. We are, in a way, the Last Airbenders ourselves.
I really am the last airbender.
Last movie benders.
Maybe the real Last Airbender was the friends we made along the way.
Honestly, you know what? That's what
But you
Aang's
guys aren't my
entire,
friends. So.
That's what Aang's entire philosophy was.
Aang was his own friend,
Yeah. He was everyone's
I
friend.
guess. To some extent, yeah. I took those eye.
Yeah. I mean, he still tried to be friendly.
That's true.
Yeah, Ozai was the aggressor there, to be fair.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm really happy to be, like, talking about this with you guys, like, on a video. I mean, I know we've talked about it before, but it feels fitting considering that, like, Avatar is how I met both of you.
Sure,
So
yeah.
we would not be here today filming this if it weren't for Avatar. So
Oh, not this version of it.
yeah,
but,
not this version
yes.
of it,
Oh, yeah.
So,
Thank
I
you,
guess
Aang.
one...
but yes, thank you.
I guess one thing to talk about first was just like, what was your experience first seeing this movie? What did you see it in theaters? Because I remember distinctly, like, I'll just hijack and go first with this, but like, I remember my brother was like super excited for this movie, and I immediately thought it was going to be bad, like even at like 13 or whatever, because I saw that M. Night Shyamalan was attached, and like in 2010 he had already had a pretty bad reputation.
Yeah.
And I remember my brother was just like, no, it looks really good, I'm like, it's gonna be bad, and then I think I ended up seeing it on TV in like 2011 or so, and that was like the first time I ever saw it. And I was just like, yeah, it's pretty much what I expected. And I'll talk about like what my growing opinion on the movie was after that, but like at the time it was like, I mean, it was pretty much what everyone else thought. It's bad. The adaptation's bad. They made changes that were stupid, and it was just kind of a waste of time.
So I did see this in theaters. I saw it in theaters like the day it came out. Cause I was like 13 and I was dumb and I was just like, oh my god, we're getting like more Avatar content. And that's like all I wanted back then was for Avatar to be like more in like the public sphere. Like it already was, but I guess I'm more thinking just like outside of the internet. I wanted it to just be like the most popular thing ever, and I was like, well, we're getting this movie made, and you know, M. Night Shyamalan's a pretty popular dude, so maybe this will get people like talking about Avatar again. So I was pretty excited about it. And I don't really remember too well my opinion like seeing it in theaters. I think I was just like still kind of hyped that we had any Avatar content at all. That was like the only thing I was seeing in regards to the movie. But then as like time went on, I just started thinking about it and I was just like, yeah, that really wasn't very good now, was it? And it wasn't until maybe like 5 years ago or so where I actually started appreciating it for being like a funny bad movie, and now I like to show it to as many people as I can. Because people, the people that I've showed it to, generally have like a pretty fun time watching it. The first
I can
time.
confirm, because that's how I watched it the first time. I watched it with you guys. I remember... I mean, beforehand, I had watched a bunch of, like, reviews raging at it and critiquing it, which is also very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, I didn't think of it as a funny bad movie. I thought of it as an insulting bad movie. And I think my earliest memory of it is being at VBS, and there was a kid talking very excitedly and trying to explain the plot to me. But I was like, this very secluded, very, a little bit obnoxious Christian girl, and I was just upset because there was like reincarnation in it, and I was like, oh no, that's a blasphemy or whatever. I was like, oh, that's automatically evil because it's not Christian. And I am very much the opposite of that now. So wow, I'm cringing at that. But
You're cringe now, too. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
no,
cringe
you can
now.
call me cringe. It's fine.
Yeah, we're all cringe.
Yeah, we're all cringe. We just own it now, so it's fine.
Yeah. I think, like, I think for me, like, the shelf life of this film for me has been just like, maybe not necessarily like, it's almost like acknowledging it for its differences, but in a way where I laugh at it.
Mm-hmm.
This is a really easy movie to laugh at. A lot of people don't take that to their advantage, and I understand there's people who are not just like, they want to see stuff that's good and that's it, and I get that. But like, for me, as someone who loves watching movies that are just catastrophic failures, this is one of my favorites just because I know the source material so well. I know how far away from it this is, and just how funny it is. Like, how funny it is for like anyone who knows what's going on at all, and like it just to see it done in such a, like, I call it a Wikipedia plot synopsis way, where they've ripped out all the interesting stuff. They've ripped out all the characterization, all the like interesting story, all the ways that things develop and how people learn new things, and it's literally just like reading a Wikipedia plot synopsis of book one with a couple little changes.
For someone like M. Night Shyamalan, who seems so passionate about this movie, and because like if you like saw any of the interviews he did back when it was about to release, you know, he's like super passionate about the original series. He seems like he really enjoys it, and then this movie just feels like there is no passion, there is no heart put into it at all. It's just kind of like you know.
It's unfortunate that none of us can speak from the point of view of someone who knows nothing about Avatar and went into this movie. Because of the bizarre choices it makes as a movie, like as a standalone movie, it's god-awful and hilarious. I would assume that it would be funny to someone who didn't know anything about Avatar.
Mm-hmm.
Probably more confusing because of the Wikipedia summary aspect of it. Let us know in the comments, like and subscribe. No.
This movie does something that, like, I think a lot of other adaptations, like, the only other one I could think that was probably on this same level of just, like, failing on both respects for both audiences, that being, like, people who have never seen the original show and people who have, it's probably, like, Dragon Ball Evolution.
Yeah.
It's that the movie is so, like you only know what's going on, essentially, I feel like, if you know what happens in the show, because they throw so much information at you so fast in a tell don't show fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you would only be able to fill in those blanks if you already knew what was happening.
Yeah.
So on the flip side, the way that they're doing it is so bad that even if you know what the story is, like, you know that they are, like, skipping things or making slight adjustments to things that make it not make sense within its own story.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you're alienating not only people who have not seen it, but people who have seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, that goes beyond
Yes.
just the story. It goes to, like, the acting not being good and a lot of other aspects of it just not being good. On that note, maybe we should talk about the things of this movie that we think are good, because we kind of all agree that there are like a couple aspects of this movie that like don't get appreciated that we think are good.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. And this isn't like in a trying to be nice to your kid's art project kind of a way. There's stuff that we think is legitimately good in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, this my rule of thumb is that in every single like bad or failed piece of media, there is at least one person who did their job well, and like this kind of speaks to that.
Yeah.
Like, there's always one, whether it's the worst song you've ever heard in your life, unless it's made by like one person. If it's like a major piece of media that's released and it's just a catastrophic failure, there is one person on that absolutely did their best and put their all into it. And I think this movie does speak to that, because I think for me, one of the main things with this is that like the music in the original show is fantastic, and it was pretty much made by like one or two different guys. And this one has James Newton Howard, I think it is.
Yeah.
James Newton Howard.
James Newton Howard, who has done most, if not all, of M. Night's movies, and
Oh, damn, dude.
for what it's worth, has done a great job on all of them. And this is no different. It doesn't sound totally like the original show. It doesn't have to. It actually does a really good job, and in a lot of ways, even like a lot of times, sometimes like soundtracks can carry the movie. I think it's like the other way around, where the movie pulls down this soundtrack.
Yes.
The soundtrack's actually pretty good.
There's definitely parts where I think the soundtrack saved the scene and didn't make it good, but made it watchable. It at least convinced me that I was watching a movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I think that in isolation, like this is a great soundtrack, and like for what the scene is asking of it, it does. It's just what the scene is asking of like the actors, and the dialogue is just not met.
Yes.
So many ways.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That is just like, it almost is like in a weird way that kind of makes it fade into the background and you don't notice it, because like obviously figuratively a lot of those failures are louder than the music itself. So you never really hear people talk about it, but this is like, seriously, like turn this soundtrack on and listen to it. It's not bad. It's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think the second thing that was amazing that we should talk about is the costume design.
Yes.
And to extent the set
makeup.
design.
Yeah, I have always been a big fan of the costumes in this movie. Especially Aang's tattoos. I love them. Because, I mean, that's how I think his tattoos, they originally wanted it to look in the show. But obviously animation is hard. And it's way easier to animate just a solid blue line than to have all these intricate details. But,
oh, yeah.
I do think that, like, if Aang and the Airbenders were real, I think that is exactly how their tattoos would look. I think they look great. I am not really looking forward to the Netflix series at all. But I hope his tattoos look something like that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm the opposite. I want them to just paint a giant light blue stripe on him.
Okay, actually, yeah, that'd be pretty funny too. Okay, I should rephrase. I'm excited for the Netflix series because I think it'll be funny.
We're excited for it the same way. Yeah. Well,
yeah, I think we're gonna enjoy it in a similar way that we enjoy this.
Prove us wrong, Netflix. That would be great of you. Unless it's boring. That would also prove us wrong, but it would be the worst possible scenario.
Yeah.
But
yeah, getting to like the costumes and the sets are just like, I think people are going to confuse the sets with like the visual effects, which like are very hit and miss in this movie, more miss than hit. Like the actual physical sets themselves, I think look very good. The lighting also isn't doing them any favors.
Yeah.
Which doesn't help. That and then the costume design in this is great. Like if you were to take those outfits and transform them to real life, there's good variety between them. The designs on them are intricate. Like you can tell there was money spent on it. Like it's just, I wish that same amount of effort would have went, or at least that same amount of quality, maybe not effort. I don't think M. Night movies are bad because of a lack of effort.
Yeah.
They're usually just usually just bad because they're just
Oh yeah,
bad.
the costumes are incredible, and as adaptations of the very simple cartoon clothing, they're amazing.
Mm-hmm.
They took them and used them as like a coloring book, kind of. If that doesn't sound like I'm disparaging the original series, because it was really good.
Mm-hmm.
But the way they interpreted these into physical clothing while still keeping the aesthetic of the show, the characterization in it, the way that the clothing expresses the characters express themselves through what they're wearing and things like that, and how the costume designer at least and the set designer took inspiration from the cultures that the show took inspiration from,
Mm-hmm.
and it looks really good.
I think a lot of this movie is like where the quality comes from is like in the aspects where they tried to just like really, you know, eat off the show's energy but make it their own. I think this is where this movie shines, which is that costume design, that music, the makeup. Where this movie fails is odd because it's almost when it goes back and tries to like in that same level of influence that the original show had, like relying on those like influences from other cultures and other older pieces of media, where this movie just falls flat on its face. Like, of course, you have the classic them getting all the names quote wrong unquote,
Yeah.
and like trying to say, trying to change all these levels of the mythos that like weren't necessarily needing to be changed in the first place. And I'm not even saying that as a person who's just an avid fan of the original show, but just the fact that they just didn't need to be changed. There was nothing about the firebenders like needing fire to bend that made this movie any better or worse. It was just a thing they did that like nerfed the firebenders, who were actually supposed to be the most powerful people anyway. It didn't make it more realistic.
It
Then
just
on the
made
other
it
hand,
way
like
stupider because, bro,
Yeah.
how did the Fire Nation take over if they can't create their
Yeah,
own
like-
fire? Like, all they have to do is just
Yeah.
blow out their candles, and there you go.
yeah, why they
You
killed
get a
the Air Nation
waterbender to
first.
just splash the entire army, not even like in a tsunami style, just like a light drizzle,
Yeah,
and then you win.
yeah.
Yeah, and then like the name changes, like you're trying to go for the more realistic thing, but the problem is that like the cultures that are within Avatar don't exist in real life, and you already miscast them to hell and back. So what's the point? Like
Yeah.
you're gonna either go all the way with this, or you need to just stick to what the show's doing.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah,
doesn't really
like,
do
if-
anything.
If you wanted authenticity with the cultures, then the casting completely screws that over. If you wanted authenticity with the show, congratulations, you ruined it.
Yeah.
So they have the
And-
worst of both worlds.
There's a larger conversation about like, obviously representing those cultures within the show, and how those relate to showcasing those cultures, but also are their own things that shouldn't be treated as like a documentary on them. But I think that this is trying so hard to do both that it fails at both.
Yeah.
It's trying way too
Yes.
hard to be extremely realistic and very attached to the culture, again with the pronunciation of the names and like a lot of other aspects with that, but then it just completely flubs on the casting and the other forms of representation of those cultures. So you can't take it seriously in either regard, whereas the show was enough of its own thing and developed its own sort of mythos that you could it was more like you would dig into the details and realize that they were supposed to be inspired by these cultures than it being like, oh, they're trying to do this, but, which is like kind of my entire, that's like how I would describe the movie in a lot of ways. Like, well, they're trying to do this, but
Well, yeah, I mean, that's people talked about that with Raya and the Last Dragon, about how this is inaccurate and this is inaccurate. But it's like fantasy. I mean, like, what King Arthur movie is exactly accurate to England? Most medieval set fantasy movies are just vaguely European, and that's fine. Nobody cares. It's not a documentary.
Yeah.
So you could do the same thing here when you're doing it respectfully, which should be a given.
And I think a lot of the failings of this, not to dive too much into just this singular topic, are kind of like what you get in a much more exaggerated sense with The Lion King in 2019, where you have, you're trying to be this extremely realistic, true to nature, true to this thing, but then you flub all these things that are supposed to add into that because you have to tell the same story as what you're adapting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of an important, like, that's maybe an important thing to bring up in terms of these live action adaptations, is that, like, a lot of those things you want to make more realistic may work on paper, but then you realize that you have to get back to the story at some point, and those things just either don't add to it, so you're just making old heads who love the story just kind of mad over nothing, or it makes it worse. And it's just like, why would you risk either of those? And I'm not saying that this would have been a better movie if it would have just been exactly like the show. If they would have pronounced the characters' names like they were in the show, this movie wouldn't be any better.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just one more thing to nitpick that they brought upon themselves.
Yes.
Yeah. We haven't really talked about how this is enjoyable.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
let's do that.
Random tangent of things that were absolutely amazing that this movie did. That Yue's death scene was done incredible, and it was different from the show.
Yeah.
And I loved it. Yeah. I loved the hair turning back to black. That was so dope.
Yeah.
I loved the characters holding her and bringing her out of the water and having an actual body to cry over.
Mm-hmm.
I'm never going to get over the hair thing. I'm sorry. That was just
honestly, I almost think that's done. I almost think that's done a little bit better than the show. I mean, I always felt that Yue's whole arc in the show was pretty rushed, and I mean, it's inarguably even more rushed in this movie. But like, I just feel like the physical representation of that's just much better in this.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense for her hair to be like to turn back to black.
Well, yeah, because Moon Spirit Life goes in, turns her hair white. Moon Spirit Life comes out, hair goes back to black.
Yep.
That follows. And also it looks incredible on screen.
Can we also talk about Yue's actress? I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing this. Seychelle Gabriel, who really did start from the bottom. Now she's here. Went on to be the voice of Asami. And
oh yeah,
I would argue that she's probably like one of the best actors in the movie. I mean, I think she does a pretty good job. I mean, with what she has. I mean,
her lines are so bad.
They're so bad, but you know what? By golly, she delivers them to the best of her ability.
It's time we show the Fire Nation that we believe in our beliefs as much as they believe in theirs.
You can tell she is in the headspace of playing Yue. She is this character when she's on set.
Yes.
Also, but the lines also suck. They don't give her a lot to work with, but she's doing her best.
Yes, she is. A lot of people, when you mention this movie, like I actually mentioned this to a coworker of mine about a week or so ago, and I was just like, I don't remember like what the context was, but I just brought this movie up, and he was like, "What Avatar movie? We don't talk about the Avatar movie." And I'm like, we should talk about the Avatar movie because it's funny. So I know it's like a big meme among the fandom. You know, there is no Avatar movie. There's no Warren Bossing say.
Beyond the fandom.
Yeah, beyond.
Pretty much everyone.
Yeah. But I really feel like this movie needs to be revisited for being really funny. Because I feel like now, because it's been like, 12 years since it came out, the initial anger people had for it, I think, is probably gone. So I feel like now more people would probably find it easier to revisit it in an ironic
And I think
way.
it helps because it would be very easy to compare this to some of the live action Disney remakes. I think this has a longer shelf life than those, because when you go back and look at this, again, it's a passion project. They wanted to make this movie, it just happened to suck.
Yeah.
Beauty and the Beast 2017 was a cash grab, and I hate that one. I don't think I'll be able to go back and rewatch, ironically.
Mm-hmm.
But Avatar: The Last Airbender, absolutely that's so much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that this movie too, just like the things that like the thing that I think people hold up on is that, oh, you know, this ruined the legacy of Avatar. It did this, it did that. This did nothing to affect the original show.
Nothing.
Like, honestly, it didn't even really affect its popularity. I bet more people went and watched the original show after this because they were curious of how much this flubbed it.
Yeah.
Like, than people who were driven away from watching it by this movie. I think this movie was like either a net neutral or maybe even a net positive for the overall franchise as a whole. And I think
I think the initial outrage of the movie probably caused people to hear about Avatar that wouldn't normally hear about Avatar. I mean, that's I think that's why my sisters and I started watching it, because it was held up against the awful movie and praised so highly. So we were like, okay, we have to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I just think that the thing that has created is this, that people haven't really given enough credit to, is that there is a huge rift between these two properties. And for me, I've never had that much issues seeing this as as kind of just a funny, bad movie on its own.
Yeah.
Because I think that, like, you have to go in understanding that, again, this doesn't do anything to affect the quality or the public perception of the original show. If anything, it improved it.
Mm-hmm.
So you can just kind of watch it as its own thing. And when you get to that point where you're just like, okay, I'm just going to watch this as I would watch like a really bad, like, LARPing film or something like that, but with a budget.
Yeah.
It becomes a lot more enjoyable, and it becomes something that, like, again, obviously not everyone loves a good bad movie, but it's something that you can watch, and it has all those Shyamalan trademarks. Like, it has all the stuff that people think is hilarious in The Happening and Lady in the Water and all these other movies that he's done that just get, you know, laughed at more than they are enjoyed legitimately. It has a lot of those hallmarks, but it's never thrown into that conversation just because people are so bent out of shape that it was, you know, based on a really good thing. But given how little involvement there was from anyone in the show, how little it did to affect anything in the franchise other than itself in terms of it, how it was perceived, you can just kind of view it as that, which is great. It failed so hard. You don't even have to think of it as a part of the franchise. You can just see it as this, like, someone uploaded this to YouTube as a fan film, but it just cost $150 million, and it was put in theaters.
Yeah.
And Nickelodeon put their name on it.
Uh-huh.
That's definitely a vibe I get sometimes when they do the tell don't show in between scenes. Specifically, like when they leave the Water Tribe and the next scene they're in the air temple and Aang is finding out that all his friends are dead. And Katara summarizes basically what happens in between.
Uh-huh.
And it really came off as this is a fan film, but they could only get access to a few sets. So they're filling you in on what happened just so you can have context in case you forget what they're cosplaying as.
Yeah.
Except this is a big budget movie.
Uh-huh.
Aang flew us to his home. He told us how he left there in a storm on Appa and got forced into the ocean where they almost drowned. Aang airbended a sphere around them and ice formed, and he couldn't remember anything after that.
Yeah, I also love in that scene where because I mean it took them like a couple weeks, I think, maybe not like a few weeks, maybe just like a week, I don't know, to get from the Water Tribe to the Air Temple, and it wasn't until they actually got to the Air Temple that Katara asked Aang what his name was.
Is it okay if you tell me your name?
The monks named me Aang.
But in the narration of the in-between of, like, them going from the Water Tribe to the Air Temple, she says his name, and then literally the next scene, she's like, is it okay if I ask what your name is? It's like, I'm gonna, like, drop everything, I'm gonna leave my whole family behind just to go travel the world with you, but I'm not gonna ask you your name, because I just forgot, apparently.
What were their conversations like on the way there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what did they call him? They were like, hey, buddy. Hey. They went up and tapped him on the shoulder instead of just asking him his name. Maybe they didn't ask his name for so long that they thought it would be awkward to bring it up.
Yeah.
Like, we haven't even thought of this. It's been 3 days and we're just now thinking that we don't know this kid's name.
Yeah. Because, like, in the show, that was, like, I mean, after the iconic penguin sledding thing, wasn't that, like, the first thing that, like, Katara asked Aang? Was it Katara or was
One
it
of the first.
Sokka?
I don't even think they asked his name. I think Aang just told him.
Oh, yeah, because he, like, sneezed, and then he's just like, I'm Aang.
You never told us your name.
I'm
I'm Aang.
Yeah,
I
like normal people.
And you know what's funny? It's things like that where I argue that Shyamalan just like doesn't think like a human when he's writing. I don't know if he wrote this film or how much he had to do with it in terms of the writing, but like that is introduced in such a just like, oh, this makes sense sort of way. It's just a kid just saying his name.
Real quick, I'm looking on
Then,
Wikipedia. He did write this movie.
Okay. It's just like anyone would have thought like I would doubt the Avatar writers were like, oh, we have to think of a way to introduce his name. No, it's just a kid saying his name because he just met people.
Yeah.
Yeah, this isn't what's your name and occupation. This is just a kid.
Hi, I'm Trent. This is Idlit. What are your names and what do you do for a living?
Yeah. Kids tell people their names when they meet them.
Yep.
Kind of impulsively.
You know what? I'd argue that even adults do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that this movie too, like I don't know how to describe it. Like we haven't talked much about like Zuko, and I feel like this movie just does not do a good job of portraying like the pain that Zuko feels. Even in that first book, like before you ever saw the second or third book, you could tell like he was like struggling with something.
Yeah.
And this one, it's like every stereotype you could have thought about Zuko in book one, like everything that like people joked about, but it's like literally just a joke, is true in this. Like he's just an angsty teenager who his dad didn't like. He gave him like a tiny little scar on his face in this movie.
Yeah,
and then
we
just said,
we
go
sat
find
here
the
and we
Avatar.
were like praising the makeup and stuff, but that's like one
Yes.
aspect where they really did not try at all. Was Zuko's scar.
Oh yeah.
And I wonder how much
Maybe-
of that was like Shyamalan's input.
I'm wondering also how much of that is like the MPAA saying
Oh, true, yeah.
you cannot have an extremely gory looking scar that's just super burnt to a crisp. Because I could see that, but on the other hand, like I just like you could have just made it look really goofy and fake.
Yeah.
I mean, or like a little bit. I don't know. I that is one thing, but I think with Zuko in this, like again, you just don't feel that level of just like internal turmoil you get with the show one, because it's just like he's kind of just portrayed as the bad guy who has a little bit of a tragic backstory. There's nothing really exciting about him. Like in the original show, I remember really liking Zuko even before I knew he was like kind of a good guy, just because I felt he was really competitive or compelling. And I was like almost rooting for him in a way, but you almost root for him to be good right away.
Yeah.
Which, and in this movie, if I'm just looking at it through this movie, I don't care what happens to him.
Yeah.
And
the only semblance of him maybe being a protagonist is, I think, his relationship with Iroh, and that's not even done really well.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing in this that, like, the only time you get where, like, you get the sense that, like, Iroh is kind of that bridge connecting him to, like, realizing himself as good is, like, right at the end where Iroh turns around and attacks some of the Fire Nation soldiers. That's pretty much it. Like, that's the only part of this where it's just like, oh, okay, so Iroh's, like, kind of the good guy. Actually, for what it's worth, I don't think Iroh is necessarily portrayed poorly in this either. It's not great. There's not a lot of focus on him, but it's not like the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, there's nothing like inherently wrong with his portrayal.
No, I mean he has no personality like the one in the show, but I think it's like if you were gonna cut the goofiness from him because you wanted it to be a little more serious, this is not the worst way you could have done it. You could have, it could have easily been as bad as Sokka, something like that, where the entire character is just gone.
Yeah.
And
I hate Sokka in this movie. He's so annoying.
Gosh. Yeah, it just
like not in a he's not unfunny to watch on screen. But if he were a person in real life, I would despise him. He's such a buzzkill.
I think that the thing with this, too, is I kind of understand what M. Night was going for with Sokka. Is that in the beginning of the show, I mean, Sokka is very, like, kind of uptight about things, really wanting to kind of prove himself. He's still kind of goofy, and that just doesn't come through.
Yeah.
It does maybe once or twice, but when it comes in the movie, it feels like a mistake.
Yeah.
Whereas in the show, it's very intentional. Like, there's the scene where, like, Katara's waterbending, and she's trying to attack those Fire Nation soldiers in the Earth Kingdom, and she accidentally freezes them, which is actually, like, a direct rip from the show.
Yeah.
And then Sokka's just, like, it's angry. It's just like, ugh, Katara. And it just, like, it doesn't come off as funny, at least intentionally. It's just kind of, it's like he's just annoyed that she messed up. And, like, that's not really the purpose of that scene. Because you can tell based on the context clues of, like, the lines that the Earth King, or the soldiers from the Fire Nation are saying, that it's supposed to be kind of a goofy, lighthearted scene. But he just, like, everything he does that's supposed to be goofy feels like a mistake.
They have no sibling dynamic in here, not nearly as much as they had in the show.
There's no dynamic between any characters in this show besides Zuko and Iroh. And it's really only from Iroh to Zuko, too. And here's another thing, like, getting back to Zuko. Zuko is probably the character that is focused on the most in this movie. But there's nothing to show for it.
Right.
It's like, you just learn his backstory. You spend so much time with Zuko that all you know by the end of it is the prince was sent to go look for the Avatar because his dad, he spoke up at a war meeting, a bird on his face, and now he goes. And you could argue, okay, that's like Notes version of what you know in the show, but that's exactly the problem. That's literally all you know about him.
It's clear that Zuko was M. Night Shyamalan's favorite character, but that he had no idea how to actually portray that. And I know that sounds weird, but that's like the vibe it gives me.
It's Zuko's story, but it's not Zuko.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just character A doing it. It's not Zuko. It's like there's a difference between a character arc and that specific character going through said arc. And all the characters do the arcs of what happens in the show in the first book, but they don't. It's not those characters doing it, so you don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Like Aang
Yeah.
does learn waterbending, and he does get to the North Pole, and he does find the ability to, create a giant spirit thing. In this case, it's a wave. In the show, it's a monster. It's the fish monster. But it's not Aang doing it, so you don't care.
Right.
Like if it were literally just Aang and you kept all the stuff, if the character Ong was characterized like Aang and went through like almost the exact same movie in the exact same way, you would care a little bit more about this movie. But it's just, I think this movie fails more from a character perspective than it does necessarily from a story perspective.
Yeah.
That was part of the draw of the original Last Airbender, was the plot is built by the characters, and it's about the characters. It's not about some destiny journey or something. And though that happens, it's not about that. It's about Aang and his friends and Zuko and all of them doing their thing and figuring themselves out. And this is very much just plot point, cute scene maybe, plot point.
Yep.
This is the like 10th grade English class. We just study how the plot works. and like we're just gonna nerd out about like how the plot goes through and nothing else.
Yep.
And that's gonna be our movie. It's focused on the aesthetic and the overall things that are happening within the universe, and those are its priorities, where the characters are more important. It doesn't matter that this movie didn't cover everything in book one. Honestly, like, I don't think this movie is, I think it all comes back to the characters. I don't think this movie is necessarily rushed in a sense that they weren't able to cover everything. I think it's rushed in the fact that you don't know the characters.
Yes.
It doesn't matter that they cut, like, the episode where Aang tries to start learning firebending. It doesn't matter that they cut certain parts, like the Kyoshi warriors and stuff like that. Maybe because Suki gets introduced, obviously, in book 2.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that. It matters more that we lost all this time to just getting the plot told to us by voiceover and like bad effects.
Yep.
And that's what we got out of it. Now, again, on the other side of things, like, that's where this movie becomes interesting as a good bad movie, because you can find things like this and figure out its failures and laugh at it.
Uh-huh.
And obviously funny lines and funny acting. Like, Caroline, insert your favorite clip here.
Okay.
You know the one.
You think my son is this person the soldiers are calling the Blue Spirit?
Yes.
Yes.
So what would you say would be like your favorite bad parts of this movie? I have a few. I have quite a few.
I mean,
some good ones.
Definitely the clip I just showed of yes. I love that. I don't know if y'all find this scene as funny as I do. It's like where Katara and Sokka are like, God, we just watched this 2 nights ago, and I'm like already forgetting what scene this was in.
Ago.
But yeah, whatever. But they were like questioning if Ong was really the Avatar, and Sokka's just like, so, are you the Avatar, Ong?
So, are you the Avatar, Ong?
Can we talk? Yeah, that's another one of my favorite bad parts of this movie. So, like, they say Ong because, like, that's how it would be pronounced. Why do they say Avatar as Avatar?
Then no one can
It's like-
figure out how to pronounce it.
Like Avatar. Like, they pronounce it like oven.
Yeah,
That's
like
an English word, as far as I understand.
Sometimes
like,
they'll add
what?
an L
That's
to
not.
it.
It's not. I don't think it's an English word originally.
I believe it's Indian.
Oh, I mean, nothing is, but
Well, yeah.
I don't think that's how it's. That's not how
Maybe
it's
they wanted it
like
to match how they were
Avatar.
pronouncing Aang.
I think that's probably it.
Sometimes
I think one
they
of my
add an
favorite
L
scenes.
To it too.
I have a few
Avatar.
added
favorite
an L
scenes.
to a lot of things.
Sounds like
Yeah, it is
evil
Mel.
character from Dinosaur 2000. To clarify, it sounds like it would be.
I have a few underrated bad moments in this film. Number one, the scene never fails to make me not laugh. It is when Zuko and Katara are fighting near the spirit water pool. And Zuko sends like 2 attacks. Both are moving at like 6 miles a year. And Katara blocks one, is still facing that way for like 3 more seconds, and doesn't see that he had launched another attack, and just gets railed by this fire and just slams into a tree like lifeless body and just flops on the ground. And this is funny for multiple reasons. Number one, the sound design is excellent. It is just thump with a bunch of like feet hitting the ground. Beautiful. Number two, she got hit by fire, is not burned at all, and is just thrown back. I don't think that's how fire works. Last time I checked, I don't know. I haven't burned myself with a huge column of flame in a while, but I don't think it just blows you back.
That also could have been a good opportunity to introduce that she has healing abilities. But no, she's just not even injured, so I don't have to worry about that.
Is this a bad time to say that, like, is this a bad time or an unwoke thing to say that them not making Paku sexist and this was kind of a misstep?
Yeah, I mean, well, Katara was barely a character the whole time, so
I guess you might as well just cut it.
Yeah, it wouldn't really make much sense for her to suddenly step up.
The thing was, and maybe this is just her dynamic with Sokka, and then everybody in the Earth Kingdom and Fire Nation just not giving a shit. I think they were going for her arc being she wants to prove herself, because everybody sees her as just a little kid, or maybe I'm reading too much into this. So that would have actually been emotionally relevant.
Mm-hmm.
I think, like, I don't want to like diagnose here, but I think you're trying to take too much from the show. I think you're thinking too much of what happens in the show, because it's 100% true in the show. Like in this, I don't get any of her like trying to prove herself at all. Like other than her like but because like. Correct me if I'm wrong. So. It's in this movie where Katara learns waterbending very fast, and Aang is frustrated that he can't learn it.
Mm-hmm.
In the show, it's the other way around, and that makes sense because that's Katara's thing: is she wants to become a strong waterbender to prove herself.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
But like in this one, they flip it around, so Katara is like done.
Yeah.
It's
fair.
That's it. So like, I don't even know if that would even work because it's not even really your arc. Yeah. Back to other favorite parts of this. I love any scene that Zhao is in.
Yeah.
Yes. I also love that prior scene I had mentioned with the Fire Nation soldiers coming up and saying like, this boy hit me with the rock and it really hurt.
That child is being arrested.
For what?
He was bending tiny stones at us from behind a tree. It really hurt.
There's also the part where the Earthbenders are trapped in the prison.
Part of why the Fire Nation was imprisoning the Earthbenders, just because they were bending stones at them and it hurt.
I love that they put the Earthbenders in a prison of Earth. Like they were in a canyon.
They
acknowledge it too. It's so good.
And the worst part is that the show teased that up for them by this literally being an episode where they put them on a raft out in the middle of the water that is made of metal, and obviously no one knew how to metal bend at the time. So, like, the show solved this issue for you. Please just figure this out.
You know, if they hadn't acknowledged it, I would have had like slightly more respect. I would have said
it's almost worse. They said it.
Yeah. Ong is just like, y'all, what are you doing? Like, you can literally break free at any time.
Why are you acting this way? There's Earth right beneath your feet.
And if Pokemon has taught us anything, it is that fire is weak to ground and rock.
Would you have liked to see more movies? Because there are pros and cons, obviously. Like what they might have, like with that Harley Quinn thing, they seem to be trying to do with Azula, and
I wish we had gotten that
whatever
so
they
bad.
would. Me too. But then what would they have done with Toph? That would have been a disaster.
Oh god, Toph would have had the most annoying girl boss energy. She would have.
Yeah.
There would have been a scene. This is how it would have gone down. They're at like the Earth Rumble 6, right? And Toph's like beating up all these dudes, and then there would have like been a scene with her and like the boulder, which this was kind of like done somewhat in the actual show, but the boulder would have been all like, "Oh, you're just a little girl. Go back to the kitchen and make me a sandwich." And Toph would have been like, "Don't call me a little girl, you man-child," and then obliterated him.
You really think that that's what M. Night Shyamalan would have done?
I don't know. I could see it going either way, I guess.
So I guess the question is, would it have been worth it?
Yes. I would have loved to have seen a sequel to this. I think it would have been very funny.
I think from an just a pure like sort of train wreck idea, I think this would have been fun to see another one. I'm glad we are not wasting the money on making another one.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that unfortunately, if you would have asked me back then when this came out, I would have said the same thing, but I also would have said, I'm glad that this will hopefully help to put a stop to people just getting allowed to make live action adaptations, and that obviously has not happened.
Yeah.
That was completely unsuccessful. But I mean, oh well, you win some, you lose most.
Yeah, amen, brother.
For every Sonic the Hedgehog, there is 3 Lion King 2017s.
Yeah.
Did you see Death Note?
Yeah.
No, see, Death Note was enjoyable, though. That one was funny.
Yeah, true.
Teasing a future episode.
Yes. So I guess my answer for would I want to see another one is like kind of a hesitant yes. A hesitant yes. I think I'm curious to see what we're going to get with this live action one. I don't have high hopes. I think it's going to be somewhere in between where it'll be a little bit more faithful, but it'll be just as boring and they'll miss the character stuff just as much, if not more.
They'll mess it up in the opposite way.
Yeah, I think that's kind of my fear going into that. Not to bring that in too much, but we'll get to that when it happens.
All we can hope for is like Avatar 13 Reasons Why at this point.
Yeah.
Hey, Appa will look less like one of the wild things.
Oh god.
Where the wild things are.
I'm very terrified to see Appa and Momo's CGI.
I mean, a lot of CG has not exactly gotten better since 2010.
True.
Some of it's gotten worse.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But hopefully they'll like workshop the design and it will be not that, because Appa, I Love You, that was terrifying. That was a scary beast there.
Yeah.
Hopefully they'll like somebody will Sonic the Hedgehog it and fix it, maybe.
At least we can live with the solace that there are even less people involved with the new live action show than there was this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who's doing the score for this? Is it James Newton Howard again?
No, we do not know.
Yeah, because it was.
Oh, we don't know?
It was going to be the guy who did for the score for both Avatar and Legend of Korra. But then he went on to go to Avatar Studios, and as far as I know, I don't think he's involved in this project anymore.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, imagine, like, your adaptation already being so bad before it's out that the composer just dips. So, yeah, watch The Last Airbender. It's a lot of fun. I know y'all like to be all like, oh, there is no Avatar movie. There is an Avatar movie. It's funny. It's worth a watch. Definitely watch it with friends. You will definitely get a good laugh out of it, I think. And you know what? If you've never seen the original cartoon, I find that hard to believe.
What are you doing? Yeah.
Yeah, like there's no excuse for you not to watch it. It's 2022, man. It's time to get woke.
Yeah.
Yeah, like on the one hand, definitely, if you haven't seen the cartoon, please watch the cartoon. It's incredible. But if you want to watch this movie first and go in blind-ish, have fun, please. I want to know how it goes.
Let us know.
Yeah,
let us know.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone who hadn't seen the show who saw this movie.
Alright, I guess that about wraps it up then.
Alright.
Alright, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Yes.